Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today we have a bit of a mix of looking at a weapon and also giving it a quick cleanup. And this is because the sword I have here, I don't have enough information for it perhaps to make a full-length video. And also it's, as you can see, clean enough that my first cleanup here doesn't again require a full video for it. But still, even though there's no massive layers of rust to excitingly remove, or there's not a lot of history I can share with you right now, it's still a very interesting model of sword, so I think it's worth taking a look at it. And what is it? Well, it's a Austrian model 1765 Grenadier sabre. It's a very interesting kind of sword. It's fairly uncommon, I would say. As far as I can tell, it was produced only in this version, at least it was produced for a handful of years, so from 1765 to 1770, something like that. And different models of Grenadier sabre are generally quite similar. The differences are not mind-blowing usually, so it can be hard to tell them apart. As far as I can tell, this is a 1765. There's a couple of interesting things to keep in mind if you're looking at Austrian swords from this era. Lots of times you will see these swords described as prima plana sabres, and they are not. They're different, although not very subtly. So prima plana sabres are another variant of short sword that were given to, well, relatively important members of a military unit. So we'll talk about it in another video when I actually have a prima plana, but suffice it to say that the difference is that the prima plana usually will have a wider knob here, like a bigger button, and it usually has an animal's head, like a bear head. I'm not sure if it's a bear head or a lion head on the pommel. So if it's not there, it's most likely going to be a Grenadier sabre. Another interesting difference with other similar swords is that if you don't have the knuckle bow, but you have kind of this end decoration also on this side of the guard here, that is probably then a rifleman's sabre. So a lot of subtle differences between models of swords, but ones that are interesting to look at, especially when you have the sword in your hand, as I was lucky enough to have. So that's all the history I have to give you. Obviously, the history of this time is really interesting. It's towards the end of it's the last breath of the Holy Roman Empire. The French Revolution is just around the corner. It's a lot of changes are going on, and Napoleonic Wars are going to come just, 50 years later are going to already be over. So it's a very interesting time in history, but I don't have the information to tell you how this sword would have been used or performed on those battlefields or in those historical circumstances, so I'll leave that up to you. But we're going to take a look at it close up now. Okay, so here we have our Austrian Grenadiers 1765. As I mentioned, its characteristics are a rather hefty weight to it, a rather short blade, so it's not as short as fascine messers or briquettes, it's a little bit longer, but not even close to a sabre. But it's still a sword you would not have wanted to be hit with. This would have brought some pain for sure. So we'll start by looking at the hilt. We have this lovely brass hilt. There's a backstrap to it, which ends in this rounded cap with a small button here where the blade is, in which the blade is peened, as you can see. And the knuckle bow, again in brass, kind of fits very loosely, I would say. Not loosely in the sense that it moves a lot, although in this one it does, but in the sense that it doesn't like wedge into a specific spot in the pommel. It just kind of folds under this cap and just sits there. So that's an interesting feature of it, I think. And what's interesting here is how it develops. So it's very wide and rounded here, you can see. Then it kind of tapers down towards the up the knuckle bow here, and then it turns here into a rather narrow cross guard. It also has these two brass langets, which seem to be part of the hilt itself, so they don't seem to be like welded on, as is the case for many other swords which often lose their langets. These are an integral part of the hilt itself. When we then look at the grip, we see this very ergonomic shape to it, so it's thicker up here and it thins down and then blends into the cap. It's covered in leather, and the grip is actually wood, so you can see it here in a little more detail. So yeah, you see the wood there, the leather cover, and you actually even see the thread that was used to create the ridges and ribs of the grip. So this is some kind of waxed thread, it seems. You can even see it down here where the leather has been damaged. And that's so far as the grip goes. Many of these swords come with marks and inscriptions. So for example, you may have letters punched into the hilt, like approval marks, I suppose, quality control marks, or regimental marks. This one does not have any though. And the same goes for the blade. The blade, often you'll find it with a crossed Z or Z. That's actually a, I don't remember exactly the name, but it's like a good luck mark or charm. It's a rune, I think, if I'm not mistaken. This one doesn't have it. It may have been wiped off over time or by the aggressive restoration the sword went through. So there's no mark on it that I can see. Now, coming to the blade, before we talk about the elephant in the room here, I just want to show you quickly the width of the ridge here of the spine. Just give you an idea of how thick the blade is and how it curves, so you can kind of get a feel for it. Unfortunately, this one was broken at some point, as I mentioned. You can see the weld job here, not an amazing weld job, but it will do. What's worse, more than the welding job, is that then they decided to, I think, use a power tool here to kind of fix it up. So you can see these rather unsightly marks. But I also have to say, if the sword was damaged to the point that it knocked off a dent like this in it and it broke, well, I would rather have a weld and have a sword that is usable rather than a broken piece of metal. Okay, so as we saw, it's not in the worst conditions, but you might have spotted some little light traces of rust. So what I'm going to do for this sword here is simply get a little bit of Autosol and go directly with the rough side of a sponge, because, well, there's not much damage we can do here. And if anything, the Autosol, I hope, may help even out some of those marks, which are so ugly. So I'll actually be a little bit generous with the Autosol here today. I know I always say it, but in this case I'll be it a little bit more than usual. I hope I can maintain focus. And yeah, the goal here is to wipe off any of those rust marks. You can see a few of them here, I think. Yeah, well, I'll be right back. It's really impossible to film while cleaning, but I'll try and clean it as well as I can, and I'll see you in just a moment. And as I think we've come to see very often, even the swords that look pretty clean end up being really, really dirty in reality. So I did some relatively vigorous cleaning on the blade here with the Autosol, way less vigorous on the brass, so I just kind of wiped it very delicately to get the dirt off. Now I'm going to get some oil and clean it up and oil it up, and then we'll see the final results. Okay, I don't know if wiping off the blade is actually something you guys enjoy seeing, but on the off chance you do, we'll see the results together. I also had to be a little bit careful with this blade because it's very sharp. I don't know if this is its original, there you go, all this black here is the dirt of this sword. I don't know if it was its original state, being so sharp, or if it was sharpened by whoever did the soldering job, the welding job. But in any case, yeah, needs a little bit of care. Another spot that is a little tough to reach here is under the langet. I don't know if you noticed in the video previously, but it was very, well, not very, but that was where a lot of rust had kind of found its place. So I'm just, it doesn't need to be super shiny, it just needs, I would just like it to be not rusty. So there we go. So as you can see, it still maintains its stains, but I'm okay with that. Sorry, these cleaning videos are always really tough to keep in focus. And now to clean the brass. So as I mentioned, I was way more delicate here on the brass, so I don't expect there to be any massive changes. However, brass is really tricky with that, and lots of times it turns out to be shinier than you expected. Okay, I think we're done. So let me focus and we take a look at it after it's cleaning. So there we go, we have this. The brass, I mean, didn't change much. But the blade, well, it didn't change much either, honestly. I'm just glad we took off a lot of that dirt. This is a very beautiful model of sword. I'm a bit sad for this specific one that is in these bad conditions, but overall it's still a very beautiful sword. And here we go, after wiping down the table, so it's a little more presentable, the whole thing. I think overall it's looking very nice. And there we go, the Austrian Grenadier sabre 1765. I have to say, even though, as we've seen, it's heavily damaged and from a collector's point of view, or from some kind of collector's point of view, it might not really be worth much. I find this to be a very beautiful sword. It's, as I mentioned, it's not very common to come by. And yeah, I was very lucky to be able to pick it up for a good price. Speaking of price, I am starting to consider selling some swords because, yeah, they're taking up a little too much room in my small sized Dutch home. So yeah, if there's anything you're interested in the videos I've done in the past or in the ones that come up in the future, just let me know, send me a message and we can discuss. A lot of stuff won't be for sale, but some will be. This one, for example, probably will be for sale at some point. So, you know, if you're interested, let me know. So thank you for watching and I'll see you soon in another sword video.